The morning I arrived in the small town felt calm, almost too calm. Like the air was holding its breath as I drove along the narrow road that led past old trees and quiet wooden houses. I had always imagined my first day here would be peaceful. I pictured myself stepping out of the car, stretching after the long drive, maybe even smiling at whoever happened to be nearby. I didn't expect trouble, and I definitely didn't expect anyone to care enough about my arrival to say anything. But the moment I turned into the gravel road that led to the small rental house I planned to stay in, I realized things would not be that simple. A group of people stood outside the neighboring property. They looked like the type who had lived there their whole lives, was comfortable in their routines, confident in the way they spoke and moved. Their eyes snapped toward me the moment my car rolled in, like I had interrupted something important. I told myself it was normal. Small towns were curious. That's what people always said. But the looks they gave me weren't curious. They felt sharp, impatient, like they already had a problem with me before I even stepped out. Still, I tried to ignore it. I parked my car beside the small house, turned the engine off, and stepped outside. The gravel crunched under my shoes and the breeze carried the smell of damp grass. It should have been a good moment, a beginning of something new. Instead, one of the neighbors marched straight toward me with a frown so deep it looked permanent. "You can't park there," the man said. Before I could even say hello, I blinked, confused. "I'm renting this place." "The owner told me this was the spot." "Well, we don't park on that side," he said, crossing his arms like he was speaking for the whole region. "You'll need to move." I glanced around. There were no signs, no markings, nothing that suggested anyone owned that patch of gravel except the property I had just rented. "I don't mean any disrespect," I said calmly, "but this is the designated parking space for this house." I confirmed it. He looked me up and down, as if deciding whether I was worth arguing with. Before he could answer, one of the women in the group called out, "Just let him know how we do things here. New people always think they can do whatever they want." A few others laughed. Not the warm kind of laugh that invites you in. The kind that pushes you out. I felt something tighten in my chest. This wasn't what I wanted on my first day. I wasn't here to fight with anyone. I took a slow breath, forcing a small smile that I didn't really feel, and said, "I'll keep it in mind." Even then, before things got worse, I had no idea how strange the situation truly was, how ironic their behavior would later seem. At that moment, I just wanted to unload my boxes, explore the area, and settle in quietly. But they didn't give me the chance, as I made a few trips between the car and the front door. Carrying boxes inside, the same group kept staring at me. Every time I glanced in their direction, they were whispering or giving each other looks, the kind that makes your stomach twist. I tried to brush it off as small-town suspicion. Maybe they weren't used to seeing new faces. Maybe they were bored. Maybe this was just how they were. But then one of the younger men walked over. Not as aggressive as the first, but still carrying an air of authority that didn't make sense. "You'll want to keep the noise down around here," he told me. Even though I hadn't made any noise other than closing a car door. "People don't like a lot of activity. I'm just moving in," I said politely. "I won't be loud," he shrugged. "I'm just saying we look out for the neighborhood. We have rules." Rules he made up, I suspected. Still, I stayed calm, mostly because I didn't want to start my time here on a bad note. I didn't come here to make enemies. I came because I needed a slower life, after years of pacing myself through busy days, demanding jobs, and constant worry. I wanted to breathe. This place was supposed to give me that, but instead, the first day felt like I had walked into someone else's territory, a place where I wasn't welcome, where I was expected to follow unspoken rules from people who didn't even know my name, while setting boxes inside. I kept thinking about how odd the situation was. I had visited many towns before, and even the smallest. Most tucked-away places were usually friendly when someone new arrived. People waved, offered help, or at least smiled politely. This town felt different. It felt guarded. I remembered the message from the lawyer a few weeks earlier, the one that had brought me here in the first place. It was short and formal, explaining that I had inherited a piece of property from a distant relative I barely remembered. The details were vague at first. Only after deeper conversations and meetings did I learn that the land was not just a small plot, but something larger, something that held quiet value in this town. Even then, I hadn't been told everything yet. Some paperwork was still being processed, and the lawyer had insisted things should remain quiet until final steps were complete. I agreed. I didn't think much about it. I was just trying to settle in. But now, watching these neighbors glare at me like I had invaded their world, a thought crossed my mind. What if they had some sort of fear of change? What if they had been living here so long that anything new was seen as a threat? I didn't know. I didn't ask. I simply carried boxes, closed the door behind me, and reminded myself that people often softened once they realized you weren't there to cause problems. After unpacking for a while, I stepped outside again to grab the last bag from the car. This time I found an older woman standing near my driveway. Her arms were crossed, and she looked irritated but not hostile like the others. She gave me a long look before saying, "They're a loud bunch over there. Don't mind them." Her tone wasn't exactly kind, but it wasn't cruel either. It was the tone of someone who didn't want trouble, but didn't want me to misunderstand the situation. "Thank you," I said, unsure how else to respond. She nodded slowly, then added, "People here can get territorial. They think they run things. Don't take it personally." Territorial. The word fit perfectly. "I just want a peaceful place to stay," said honestly. She sighed as if she had heard that before from others who didn't get what they came for. "Peace takes time around here." Then she walked away without another word. I stood there for a moment, wondering what kind of place I had moved into. Was this just my unlucky first impression? Or was this how things were every day? The house behind me felt unfamiliar, the quiet around me heavy. I had dealt with difficult people before, but dealing with an entire group was something else. Later in the afternoon, I decided to take a short walk around the town. I wanted to see the small shops, the roadside fruit stalls, the old bakery someone told me about in a message. I wanted to feel hopeful again. But as I walked down the main road, I noticed the same people from earlier talking animatedly with others, pointing in my direction. Some of the people they spoke to gave me quick glances before returning to their conversation. It became clear that word about me had spread faster than I had even settled into the house. I didn't understand why. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't said anything wrong. I was just new. It didn't make sense. Still, I kept walking. The town was small, but pleasant. Flowers grew along the sides of some houses. Kids played near a fenced yard. A few older men sat outside a cafe talking quietly. They didn't seem bothered by me. They didn't even notice me. The strange thing was that the farther I walked from my neighborhood, the more peaceful and normal the town felt. It was only that small cluster of people who acted like they ruled everything by the time I returned home. The sun was starting to set, and the sky was streaked with colors that made the whole place look softer. For a moment, I let myself relax. Maybe this wasn't permanent. Maybe tomorrow would be better. As I stepped into the house, the phone buzzed. It was a message from the lawyer reminding me about an upcoming meeting to finalize details about the land. I stared at the message, thinking about the neighbors, the way they acted like every inch of this place belonged to them. I didn't know then how wrong they were. I didn't know how different things would look once the truth came out. I didn't know that the very land they were so protective of was the land they didn't even own. That knowledge was coming. But on this first day, all I felt was the heavy mix of confusion and disappointment. I wanted a peaceful beginning, but instead, I walked into a place where people judged me before I even said a word. If only they knew the truth. If only they realized how strange it was to try and boss around the person who would soon hold the papers to a large part of the ground beneath their very homes. But at that moment, on that first day, I simply closed the curtains, sat on the edge of the bed, and told myself that tomorrow might be different. Little did I know, tomorrow would bring its own surprises. The next morning came with a soft light slipping through the thin curtains of the small room. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The quiet felt almost gentle, as if the world outside had decided to give me a peaceful start after the uneasy day before. But the calm didn't last long. The moment I stepped outside, I was reminded that some people were very determined to make sure this place didn't feel like home to me. I had barely locked the door behind me when I spotted the same group of neighbors standing together again. It was strange how they always gathered in the same place, like they owned that small patch of gravel. Their voices carried across the space, low but pointed, as if they wanted me to hear without admitting they did. I didn't make eye contact. I wanted a simple morning. I had planned to take a walk to the cafe I noticed the day before, maybe get something warm to drink, sit by the window, and try to enjoy a quiet morning. I needed something normal, something that felt welcoming. But before I could even make it halfway down the driveway, one of the men called out, "Hey! You need to move those bins." I turned, confused. Which bins? He pointed to 2 small trash bins, sitting exactly where the landlord's note had said they should be placed. "Those, we don't put them there. You'll block the view." I looked around. The bins were on my side of the house, not blocking anything except maybe a corner of a fence. "The owner told me to keep them there," I said carefully. He shrugged, annoyed by my answer. "Well, that's not how we do things. You'll need to move them to the back." Something inside me tightened. This wasn't about bins. It wasn't about rules. They were trying to remind me again and again that I wasn't one of them, that I had to listen to them, that I had to follow rules they made simply because they felt like making them. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't angry, but I felt a slow frustration building. Finally, I said, "I'll leave them where they are for now." Then I walked away before he could argue. I could feel their eyes burning into my back as I walked down the road. Even from a distance, I heard one of them mutter something like, "These new people never listen." I pretended I didn't hear it. As I reached the main road and started toward the cafe, the air felt cooler, lighter, softer, so different from the tension around my house. The small cafe stood on the corner, with old wooden tables outside, and a sign that looked like it had been painted years ago. When I stepped inside, the warm smell of fresh bread and coffee hit me instantly, making the entire world feel a little brighter. The person behind the counter gave me a polite smile. Not overly friendly, but not cold, either just normal, which felt like a gift after everything else. I ordered a cup of tea and found a seat near the window. As I sat there watching people pass by, something became clear to me. The people causing trouble weren't the whole town, just a loud part of it. Some people smiled as they walked past. A few nodded politely. No one stared at me like I was a stranger invading their space. It made me wonder why things were so different in that one corner of town. Why those particular neighbors acted like they controlled everything. Why they seemed bothered by my presence before they even knew anything about me. After finishing my tea, I walked around town for a while. I looked at the old library, the quiet school, the row of small shops lined along the street. I noticed that most people went about their day without caring who I was or where I came from. But when I got close to my street again, the atmosphere shifted immediately. They were still there. It was almost unsettling how they seemed to have endless time to stand around. I wondered if this was their daily routine or if they were doing it because of me. When they spotted me approaching, the same woman who had made rude comments the day before leaned close to another person, whispering something that made them both laugh. I walked past them without stopping. But the moment I reached my door, one of the men called out again. "You're going to the meeting tonight, right? Everyone here attends." "What meeting?" I asked. He rolled his eyes like I should already know. "Neighborhood meeting. We always hold one at the start of each month. You need to come." I considered saying no, but before I could answer, he added, "It's important. If you're living here, you follow the schedule." I felt the pressure in his tone. It wasn't an invitation. It was an instruction. "I'll think about it," I said. He frowned. "It's not something you think about." I ignored his tone and walked inside. I didn't want to go to the meeting. I didn't want to spend my evening in a room full of people who acted like they owned the world around them. But something about the way he insisted made me curious. What exactly were they planning to talk about? Why were they so desperate for control? Why did they feel threatened by a newcomer who hadn't done anything at all? Later in the afternoon, I sat at the dining table and looked at the documents the lawyer had sent me. Papers about land boundaries, listings of old properties, and legal descriptions that were hard to understand at first glance. I flipped through them slowly, wondering how much of what I now had ties to this neighborhood. I wasn't sure yet. The lawyer had promised to explain everything clearly in the upcoming meeting, but something inside me sensed that the land I inherited was not small. And that may be, just maybe, the reason the neighbors acted so controlling was because they believed the land around here belonged to them. They believed they were protecting something they believed they had: authority. But what if that authority wasn't real at all? Still, I put the papers away. The truth would come soon, but I didn't want to think too far ahead. All I wanted was to get through the day without more tension, as the sun began to dip behind the rooftops. I stood at the window watching people walk toward the community hall where the meeting was going to be held. I wasn't sure whether I should go, but something inside me said I needed to. Not because they demanded it, but because understanding this place would make the coming days easier. So as the sky darkened, I put on my jacket and stepped outside. When I reached the hall, the same group of neighbors spotted me right away. The man who insisted I attend gave a nod as if he had forced me into doing something important. The others watched me with looks that were not quite welcoming but full of curiosity, as if they were waiting to see whether I would obey their rules. Inside the hall, people sat on folding chairs, chatting among themselves. It felt crowded, warm, and a little noisy. I found a seat in the back, hoping to blend in. But the neighbors who had been bothering me sat together in the front row, talking loudly when the meeting started. A local official gave updates about water lines, road maintenance, and small upcoming events. Nothing unusual, but there was a moment when the conversation shifted. Someone in the crowd stood up and said, "We need to discuss the property matters. There are rumors about ownership changes." My heart stopped for a moment. The official hesitated before saying, "We'll address that when the final paperwork is completed. For now, we can only give limited information." Few people murmured. Then one of the neighbors, the same man who had tried to tell me where to park, stood up with a puffed chest. "We better know what's going on. We've managed this area for years. If someone new is planning changes, we need to take action." There it was, that need for control, that fear of losing it. I sat quietly, watching him, wondering what he would say if he knew the truth. That I wasn't just someone renting a house here. That I wasn't just a passing visitor. That the land they proudly claimed to manage wasn't theirs at all. The meeting dragged on with voices rising and falling, people arguing about repairs, events, and unimportant details. I barely spoke. I just watched, listened, and understood something clearly for the first time. These people had built their own version of power here, and my arrival shook it. When the meeting ended, people slowly filtered out. Some talked to each other in the chilly night air. Others left quietly. I took my time leaving, not wanting to run into the group again. But they were waiting outside near the path. One of them smirked. "See, that's how we run things here. You better get used to it." I didn't respond. I just walked past them as I headed home under the streetlights. I realized something important. They weren't rude because of who I was. They were rude because of who they thought I wasn't. They thought I had no power, no standing, no claim. But they were wrong. Very soon, they would learn that the land they proudly guarded didn't belong to them. And when that truth came out, everything in this place would change. For now, though I walked into my house, closed the door gently behind me, let out a long breath. Tomorrow would bring even more tension. I could feel it. But tomorrow would also bring me closer to the truth. They had no idea it was coming. The morning after the meeting felt heavier than the days before. It wasn't just the weight of the tension around the neighborhood. It was the weight of knowing that something important was getting closer. Something that would change everything, even if no one else saw it coming yet. While I stood in the small kitchen making tea, I kept thinking about the meeting. The way the neighbors spoke like they held the final say in every decision. The way they looked at me like I had stepped into a place I didn't belong. But what stayed with me most was the official's hesitation when the topic of property ownership came up. It was a small moment, But I noticed it. Everyone noticed it. The neighbors reacted as if the land was theirs to control. But the officials seemed unsure how to break the truth without stirring something big. I didn't know all the details yet. The lawyer said we'd meet soon, and I'd learn everything about the land I inherited. But the way those neighbors behaved made it clear that whatever the truth was, it would surprise them. Maybe even shock them. I took my tea and stepped outside, hoping to get some fresh air before dealing with anything else. But the moment I opened the door, I saw someone standing near the edge of the driveway. It was the older woman who had spoken to me the day before. It's the one who seemed tired of the group's behavior but not surprised by it. She glanced at me with a calm expression. "You're up early," she said. "I'm usually an early person," I replied. She nodded slowly, her eyes drifting toward. The group gathered near their usual spot. "They're already at it," she murmured. I followed her gaze. Sure enough, the same neighbors were huddled together, talking with loud voices as if they were making plans. It amazed me how they had the energy to be involved in everything happening around the street. They acted like guards of a territory they never truly owned. The older woman let out a breath. "You're not the first person who moved here and got treated like this," she said. "But something tells me this time will be different." I didn't know what she meant. "Different how?" She shrugged. "There's something in the air lately. People talking, rumors floating around. They feel like they're losing control. And when people like that feel threatened, they behave even worse." I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. She wasn't rude, and she wasn't asking for anything. She was simply observing the world around her, and somehow, she understood the situation better than I did. After a moment, she added, "Be careful with them. They think they own everything around here." Her gaze lingered on me for a second longer before she turned and walked away. When she left, I looked at the neighbors again. They were still there, still watching, still whispering. I knew that if I tried to pretend everything was normal, they would just find new ways to make my days harder. But I didn't want to fight, not yet. Not until I understood everything I needed to know about the land. I finished my tea, grabbed my keys, and decided to visit the lawyer's office earlier than planned. Even if he wasn't ready for the full meeting, maybe he could answer a few questions. The walk to the town center was quiet. The sun was still low, casting a soft golden light on the roofs and fences. Most people were just starting their day. A few greeted me politely. Some ignored me, but no one else acted like the group near my home. When I reached the small office, the door was open, and the lawyer was already inside sorting through papers. He looked up with surprise when he saw me. "I wasn't expecting you this early," he said. "I just thought we could talk a little before the main meeting," I replied. He nodded, motioning for me to sit. "I figured you might come sooner or later," he said. "People have been talking in town. I'm sure you've noticed the tension." "I've definitely noticed," I said. He reached for a folder, the one he had shown me before, and opened it. "We're almost done with the final paperwork. Once everything is stamped, you'll officially take ownership of the land." I leaned forward. "I know the land is bigger than I expected, but how big is it really?" He paused before answering, as if choosing his words carefully. "It's several acres," he said. "Much larger than most people in town are aware of. The boundaries stretch from the hill behind your rental house, across the open field, and down to a cluster of older properties." I frowned. "Older properties?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. Some of them include the houses of the neighbors you've been having trouble with." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed was different. It hit deeper. So, they're living on land they don't actually own. In simple terms, yes, he said. Their houses sit on land your relative leased to them a long time ago. Most of the residents here don't know the details. They only know the houses were passed down through family lines, so they assume they own everything. The official records say otherwise. I sat back, letting the information settle in. The people who ordered me around, judged me, tried to tell me every second how things were done, they weren't the owners. They weren't the ones in control, the lawyer continued. When the news becomes public, there will be reactions. Some people will accept it, others not so easily. I knew exactly who he meant. The neighbors who spent every day, acting like they ruled the whole street, were going to be the loudest. The most upset, the most desperate to hold on to their illusion of power. What am I supposed to do when they find out? I asked. He closed the folder gently. That depends on how you want to handle it. You can enforce new agreements, adjust the leases, or simply leave things as they are. But they need to know the truth, and you should be the one to tell them. I didn't feel ready for that. Not yet, but I understood I didn't have a choice. The truth was coming whether I wanted it to or not. After I left the office, I walked around town again. This time, everything looked different. The houses, the fences, the open spaces, they weren't just random pieces of property. They were part of something I had inherited, something I was responsible for. When I reached the corner near the bakery, I noticed two of the neighbors standing there, talking to someone I didn't recognize. As soon as they saw me, they looked at each other, then at me, with eyes full of suspicion. One of them stepped forward and said, "We heard you went to see the lawyer again this morning." I stayed calm. I did. He narrowed his eyes. "And why is that?" "Planning something." "Just sorting paperwork," I said simply. He didn't seem satisfied with my answer. "You better not be making decisions that affect this neighborhood without talking to us. We run things here." Every time he said that, it became more and more ridiculous. But I didn't show it. I didn't argue. Instead, I said, "Anything that needs to be discussed will be discussed at the right time." He scoffed as if I dared to speak out of turn. "You're new here. You don't get to decide what the right time is." I didn't respond. There was no point. The truth would speak for itself soon. When I finally made my way back home, I felt more aware of everything around me. The gravel under my shoes, the fences lining the street, the hills and the distance, all of it connected in ways the neighbors didn't understand yet. As I opened the door to my house, I paused for a moment and looked back at the street. The small group was standing in their usual spot again, watching everything like guards of their little world. But their world was built on something they didn't own, and when the truth came out, it would shake everything they believed. That evening, as I sat by the window reading through the documents again, I realized something important. This wasn't just about land. It was about power, about control, about fear. The neighbors weren't rude because they wanted to be. They were rude because they thought they were losing something. They didn't know it yet, but they had already lost it a long time ago. Soon. The truth would be too big to hide. Soon they would know exactly who I was. And soon they would understand why their attempts to boss me around never meant anything at all. The morning felt brighter than usual. Even though the sky was still gray from the night before, he woke up early again, not because he had to, but because his mind wouldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened in the past couple of days. The strange welcome, the rude voices, the shocked faces when the truth came out. It all played in his head like scenes from a movie he never expected to be part of. He made himself a simple breakfast and stepped outside. The air smelled fresh, and there was a soft breeze moving through the trees. He liked mornings like this. They made him feel calm. They reminded him that not every moment had to be loud or stressful. Some moments were just meant to be lived quietly. He walked toward the village area, again because he felt it was time to talk things through. The people there needed to understand he wasn't looking for a fight. He didn't want revenge. He wasn't returning as someone angry or proud. He simply wanted fairness and respect. As he reached the open pathway leading to the homes, he noticed a group of people waiting. They weren't yelling or acting tough this time. They looked uncertain, maybe even nervous. A few of them exchanged glances when they saw him approaching, and one of them stepped forward. It was the same man who had shouted at him on the first day, the one who tried to show authority. But now his voice was soft. We wanted to talk," the man said. He nodded slowly. "I'm here." "Go ahead." The group seemed unsure where to start. Finally, one of the older residents stepped forward, a man with quiet eyes who looked genuinely sorry. "We didn't know who you were," he said. "And even if we didn't know, we still shouldn't have treated you like that. It wasn't right." He looked down, then continued. "You came here peacefully. We should have been the same." There was a sincere silence after those words. Not forced, not fake, just real. He took a breath and looked at all of them. I didn't want trouble. I only wanted to understand this place better. I respect anyone who lives here. Everyone deserves that. A few heads nodded. Someone murmured a quiet apology. Another person added, "We were wrong." The tone was honest this time. He stepped a little closer so they would know he wasn't holding any grudges. "I'm not here to make life hard for anyone," he said. "I know what it's like to work, to struggle, to feel uncertain. I came here because I wanted to see this land with my own eyes. Not to show power, not to scare anyone." One of the younger women in the group spoke up. "I thought you were just another outsider coming to order us around." Her voice trembled slightly. "We get people like that sometimes. They talk big, but they don't understand how we live. So we get defensive." He nodded, understanding more than they realized. "I get that. But I'm not here to push anyone down. I just want respect both ways." The group exchanged looks, and slowly the tension in their shoulders eased. It was as if a weight had been lifted. After a moment, the older man spoke again. "If you're willing, maybe we can start over." He held out his hand, not with fear, but with humility. He hesitated only for a heartbeat before taking the hand. Their handshake was simple, but meaningful. "Yes," he said. "We can start over." A small smile spread across a few faces. The younger woman stepped forward. "Maybe you can tell us why you came here in the first place. What brought you back?" she asked. He looked around, noticing the homes that stood close to one another, the children playing at a distance. The quiet roads lined with trees he remembered from years ago. "This place used to be peaceful," he said. "I spent part of my childhood visiting this land. My family never fully lived here, but we came often. It was a place that felt simple and safe. I wanted to see if it still felt the same." The older man nodded. "Things changed a lot. Some good, some not so good. But people here, we try." "I can see that," he said. The group slowly relaxed, and a few people invited him to walk with them. They wanted to show him things he might not have seen yet. Fields that needed repair, a water supply issue they'd been dealing with for months, a few social problems they didn't have the resources to fix. He listened carefully to all of it, not as a man with authority, but as someone who cared. He asked questions, and the villagers answered openly, now trusting him enough to speak honestly. As they walked deeper into the area, a young boy suddenly ran up to the group. His feet were covered in dust, and he held a small toy in his hand that looked homemade. "Mama said, 'Lunch is ready.'" The boy shouted happily. The group chuckled softly. The boy didn't seem to notice the tension that once existed here. Children rarely carried the weight of adult conflict. One of the women bent down and adjusted the boy's shirt before looking at him again. "You're always running around barefoot," she said with a smile. The boy grinned and dashed away. The moment warmed the air a little, made everything feel more human. The older man turned back to him. "You know, if you want, you can eat with us today. We don't have anything fancy, but it's fresh and warm." He glanced at the group. Their invitation was real. There was no fear in their voices now, no suspicion, only a genuine wish to include him. "I'd like that," he replied. They led him to a small open area near a cluster of homes where a few simple dishes had been prepared. Nothing expensive, but everything smelled good. He noticed how everyone helps him bring in plates, some handing out water, others making space for everyone to sit. He sat down with them, not at the head of the group or in a special spot, just among them, and it felt right. The conversations that followed were light. One person talked about their job in the nearby town. Another shared a small funny moment that had happened earlier that morning. Someone else talked about their kids. Nothing dramatic, it's just everyday life. He found himself smiling, enjoying the conversations in a way he didn't expect. It was the kind of moment that reminded him why he wanted to connect with people rather than distance himself. After lunch, a few teenagers approached him hesitantly. "Can you walk with us?" one of them asked. "We want to show you the old playground. It's a mess now, but we used to play there all the time." He stood up. "Sure, show me." They took him to a corner of the land where an old playground stood, partly rusted and covered in weeds. Swings barely moved, and the slide looked worn out. The teenagers explained how they used to gather there when they were younger, but stopped because it wasn't safe anymore. "We tried to fix it ourselves once," one said. "We didn't have the tools." He looked at the broken playground and felt a quiet determination rise inside him. "Maybe we can fix it together," he said. Their eyes widened. "Really?" He nodded. "Why not? A place like this should be full of life." The teenagers exchanged excited looks, and one of them grinned widely before running off to tell others. He remained there for a moment, imagining the place restored, children laughing, families gathering, people feeling safe. It felt like something worth working on. As the afternoon stretched on, more villagers came to join the group. Some brought tools, some brought ideas, some just came to see what was happening. There was energy now, a sense of togetherness. He helped where he could, lifting heavy pieces, clearing weeds, testing old boards to see which ones needed replacing. The villagers worked beside him, not under him, and he liked that. They talked, laughed, shared stories. The fear and distance that once stood between them faded completely. By the time the sun began to set, the area already looked much better. Not perfect, but hopeful. A few swings now moved freely. The ground had been cleared. The slide was cleaned. The place felt alive again. One of the teenagers looked proudly at the progress. "It looks like a playground again," he said softly. He smiled. "This is just the beginning." People nodded in agreement. As evening approached, the villagers slowly started heading back to their homes, tired but happy. The older man stayed back for a moment and looked at him. "Did you change the whole mood of this place today?" the man said. "Not because you own the land, but because you were willing to work with us," he replied quietly. "Respect goes both ways. If we build that, everything else becomes easier." The man nodded. "You're right. I'm glad we got a chance to know you properly." He looked at the sky, watching the soft colors of sunset blend together. "Tomorrow," he said, "we can do more. There's still a lot to fix." "We'll be ready," the older man replied. He walked home with a calm feeling in his chest. He didn't expect things to change so quickly, but sometimes change came when people were simply willing to listen and work together. He knew there were still challenges ahead. There would be more decisions to make, more repairs, more conversations. But for the first time since arriving, he felt a genuine connection with the people living on the land his family owned, and he felt something else too, a quiet responsibility, not forced by power, but shaped by understanding. As he reached his home and sat down for a moment of rest, he realized something important. This land wasn't just property. It was a place full of stories, memories, struggles, and hopes. And now, he was part of that story in a way he never expected. Tomorrow would bring new moments, and he was ready for them. The next morning came quietly. He woke up before the sun, not because of stress, but because something inside him felt ready. The last few days had changed a lot for him, for the villagers and for the land that carried all their stories. He felt it every time he stepped outside. The air felt different now, lighter, as if the place itself could finally breathe again. He made tea and stood near the window, watching the sky shift slowly from pale gray to soft orange. It reminded him of how change starts slowly, quietly, and then all at once. He took a deep breath, grabbed his bag, and headed out toward the village area. When he reached the center of the settlement, he found people already awake and working. A few were repairing fences. Others were cleaning the small open space where children often played. He could see the changes from yesterday to today, and it made him smile. The energy was different, more hopeful. A group noticed him arriving, and one of them waved with a warm smile. Their greeting felt natural, not forced like before. "You're early today," one of the men said. "Couldn't sleep much," he replied with a light laugh. "Today's a busy one," the man added. "People are ready to continue fixing the playground and talk about the water issue too," he nodded. "I'm here for all of that. Whatever needs to be done, let's do it." As they spoke, a few children ran past them, laughing loudly. They held pieces of rope, pretending they were jumping challenges. Their happiness filled the air with a kind of innocence the place has been missing. He followed the group toward the playground. More people had shown up than yesterday. Some held tools, some carried buckets of paint, and others brought food for everyone who would be working throughout the day. Before starting, the older man from the previous day approached him with a gentle smile. "I want to thank you again," the man said. "We haven't seen people come together like this in a long time. Yesterday felt like a new beginning for everyone." He nodded. "We can make this place better if we work together." "No one can do everything alone," the older man agreed, his eyes warm with appreciation. Soon, everyone got to work. He helped remove old wooden boards, lifted broken metal pieces, and joined the younger boys in clearing out the weeds near the fence. The kids watched him with admiration, whispering among themselves before gathering the courage to ask if they could help too. "Of course you can," he said with a smile. "Just be careful with the tools." The children nodded eagerly and began picking up smaller sticks and trash around the area. By late morning, the playground looked very different. Fresh paint covered the metal bars. A few new boards replaced the old ones. The swing chains were adjusted. The slide was cleaned and polished. Everyone kept moving with a sense of purpose. While the group rested under the shade of a large tree, one of the women brought water for everyone. "You've done more in 2 days than we've managed in months," she said while handing him a cup. "It wasn't just me," he replied. "Everyone helped. That's what made the difference," she nodded. "Still, you brought the spark back." Her voice carried a soft kindness as he took a sip of the cool water. A group of teenagers approached. "We want to show you something," one of them said. He stood up and followed them to the far end of the land, where a small water tank stood. The tank looked worn out, with visible cracks and a pipe that barely worked. "This is our biggest problem," one teenager explained. "Sometimes it barely gives any water. Some days we have to walk far just to get enough for our homes." He examined the tank closely. It needed repairs, maybe even a replacement. "Why hasn't this been fixed earlier?" he asked gently. "We tried," one young boy said, "but we didn't have money for proper materials. The ones we used didn't last." He looked at their tired faces and understood their struggle. "Okay," he said firmly, "we'll fix this too. It might take time, but it will be done properly." Their eyes brightened instantly. "Really?" one asked. "Yes, clean water isn't something people should struggle for. It's a basic need, and we'll make sure you get it." The teenagers exchanged excited looks, and one ran off to tell the others. He placed his hand on the side of the water tank. Feeling the rough surface and imagining what it would look like when fixed, it gave him a sense of purpose. When he returned to the group, more villagers had gathered. The atmosphere was cheerful and full of movement. Kids played near the trees, women cooked over small stoves, and the men discussed the next steps of the repairs. Someone called out to him from across the yard. "Come sit with us," a man shouted. He walked over and joined a group sitting on a large woven mat. They offered him food, simple dishes, but cooked with care. The older man looked at him thoughtfully. "Do you plan on staying here long?" he asked. He paused, thinking. "I didn't plan anything at first. I only came to see this place again. But now..." He glanced around at the people laughing, working, sharing stories. "Now it feels like I should stay longer. Maybe not forever, but long enough to help bring this place back to what it can be." The older man smiled. "You'll be welcomed here. Truly." They continued eating while talking about the past, how the community used to gather on weekends, how festivals filled the open grounds, how families helped one another. The stories painted a picture of a lively, caring place, one that slowly lost its spark, but was now finding it again. After lunch, he walked back to the playground to see the progress. It looked almost new now. Even the children seemed surprised. "Can we play now?" one of the kids asked eagerly. He checked the newly fixed swing, tugging it firmly. "Yes," he said with a grin, "but be careful." The children cheered and rushed to the swings and slide. Their smiles and laughter filled the air, and for the first time in years, the playground felt alive. He took a moment to sit on a nearby bench, watching them play. The younger woman who apologized to him earlier sat beside him. "They haven't been this happy in a long time," she said softly. "They deserve moments like this," he replied. She nodded and then looked at him. "I'm glad you came back here. Even if things started the wrong way, it led us to this moment." He smiled gently. "Life works in strange ways sometimes." Later in the afternoon, the group gathered to discuss the water tank problem. Some had ideas, others had tools to offer. A few were willing to donate small amounts of money, one of the men said. "We can't do everything alone, but if we all give what we can, it will work." He stood up and looked at the group. "I'll cover the cost of the materials," he said calmly. "You don't have to worry about that." There was a sudden silence. "But that will be expensive," someone said. "It's fine. It's something that needs to be done, and it will help everyone here." Their expressions softened. They weren't used to someone offering so much without wanting something in return. The older man stepped forward. "Thank you," he said with emotion in his voice. "You didn't have to do this, but you're choosing to. That means a lot." He nodded quietly. Before the discussion ended, he added, "I'm not doing this as the owner of the land. I'm doing it as someone who cares." People clapped softly. Touched by his sincerity, the rest of the day was spent planning repairs, making lists of needed items and organizing groups for different tasks. By late evening, after hours of work and laughter, the village looked different, cleaner, brighter, more alive. Even the air felt lighter. Before heading home, he stood for a moment in the center of the open space looking around. A few villagers approached him. "You changed things here," one of them said. He shook his head lightly. "No, we changed things together." They smiled at him with genuine warmth. As he walked back toward his home, the sunset painted the sky in soft colors. Children were still playing in the distance, their voices echoing gently. Adults stood together, chatting in relaxed tones. The place no longer felt tense. He reached his door, paused, and looked back once more at the land. He had come here expecting nothing, just a simple visit. But instead, he found something meaningful. He found people who needed support. He found a community that deserved better. He found a reason to stay longer. And the land his family's land felt more than just property now. It felt like a responsibility he was willing to carry. He stepped inside, sat down, and let the quiet fill the room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tasks, and maybe even new bonds, but he was ready, because sometimes life surprised you in the best ways. Sometimes a rough beginning led to a beautiful ending, and sometimes the place you thought you were just visiting became the place you were meant to help, to care for, and to belong to. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the day settle inside him. This chapter of his life wasn't what he expected, but it was exactly what he needed, and the story wasn't ending. It was only just beginning.